for all the French in general, because I have found out since that Debussy failed a piano exam playing a Beethoven sonata. And Ravel, in the composer that were his composer's patron, so to speak, didn't include Beethoven. And it was very strange because in the case of Ravel, he was very much interested in Mozart. That Mozart was for him the master of all masters. But after that, no French composer even bothered to mention Berlioz. And that has been a very interesting situation, because there is that book which is on Rameau, which I have been asked to comment because it was first Bisson was offered to write and to read the book and to make comments, and then Bisson didn't want to do it and asked me to do it. So I read the whole thing, and it's very strange, for example, that Gieseking, who's the greatest Ravel performer, never met or discussed with Ravel, which is very strange. There is a discussion which is recorded, which is between Ravel and Toscanini. And Ravel bitterly complained to Toscanini that it was playing his music far too fast. He also said, and he had in the back of that book, which is very good actually, because there is the complete listing of every piece of music that was owned by Ravel and every record that he had, and he was very conscious of the existence of Schoenberg. He liked Schoenberg. He said that Schoenberg was a great genius, but it was most unfortunate that some young French composer have acquired an influence, have accepted to be influenced by him, because 12th music will teach nothing possible to the French. So he was absolutely convinced that the French had to find their way in the context of a renewal of tonal music, leaving aside completely what the German expressionism had done. But I mean, you in fact, you see the conflict and the inter-influence between the French and the German music is something that has happened since the beginning. I mean, the beginning of polyphony, the Flamand and were French and Belge that really created and set up polyphonies. Then it becomes self-evident, at least in the case of France versus Germany, that when you have a state-controlled country, you have a lesser chance to have a development of music than the other countries. French music was hijacked by Louis XII, Louis XIII, and he was interested to have, by absolute royalty, to have their music, and which became an entertaining music. Therefore, an harmonic music, because, I mean, you have to harmonize tunes to write a popular music. And the polyphonic music was taken over by the German. Nobody talked about the origin of it, which is extraordinary, interesting, by Calvisius, which is about 100 years before Bach. And Bach, now you will notice that almost nothing was published during Bach's life and the very beginning of Schoenberg's life. I mean, what people study were not books. It was the well-tempered clavier. And it started in a freakish way. It happened that the grandmother of Mendelssohn was a Bach freak, and she had the well-tempered clavier on her piano. And it is the first thing that Mendelssohn got interested to, and in fact his 10-string symphony, which were written when he was 17, 18, 19, 20, were in fact studies in the style of Bach. He was trying to learn how Bach was writing, composing music. And Beethoven is the first pianist that knew both volumes of the well-tempered clavier when he was 20 years old. And so after that, I mean, it's obvious what happened. I mean, Bach became performed by Mendelssohn and then more extensively printed. And it was, in fact, the source of music making for all tonal music. Because, in fact, he had embedded in tonality everything that modality had started. And in fact, because in fact modality couldn't develop a Finnish language. It had to be tonal to implement the next level of progress that modality could do.
When did you encounter the well-tempered clavier?
Well, in my case, there was a piece of luck. Probably. Because the new director of the Conservatoire, which was Claude Delvincourt, who was a minor composer, was very annoyed because the piano teachers were only performed even the 19th century master of pianistic piano playing, which is supposed to be also composing, but was not. I mean, you know, the sonata of Karl Brenner and Dussek, and I mean also the better Ashpor, but I mean, and Liszt, of which really there is 750 pieces. Opuses by Liszt, and of course there is at least 500 which are planned pop music. And so the piano class, the piano teacher had the obligations to read and to remember and to have by heart the well-tempered clavier, either one or the other volume, but not both. And in the exam, they were supposed to be asked. By that time, I had left the conservatory. I mean, I was studying on my own because I couldn't stand these people. So I didn't do those kind of piano exam. But they were asking by hazard somebody play the Prelude and Fugue of F sharp minor, or that one from B major, or, you know. And so I became really 6.5, 8.5, 9.5. By the time I was 9.5, I began to learn and to memorize the well-tempered clavier. At one point, I knew both volume by heart. Because also I had been there, these pieces had been embedded in my solfeggio training. So when I discovered Bach, there was immediately a relation with Brahms. When I discovered Brahms by myself, who nobody was accepted or even mentioned,